there were a bunch of guys. I mean, the wide receiver market is now super crazy, just considering the fact of Debo needs. We should probably talk about that. I mean, the wide receiver market first got screwed up when the Jags overpaid for Christian Kirk, and then everybody in the world has now decided they want wide receiver one money, whether that be Debo Samuel, AJ Brown, or DK Metcalf. Apparently, this is all mostly rumors, except for Debo, who's about to get traded. Maybe, I don't know, but I think it's an interesting outlook in the future because we just had a receiver who broke pretty much every rookie record we've ever seen. And I definitely think that the Bengals are aware of that. And that's going to be a guy at some point that they're going to have to load up the Brinks truck for.
Yeah, the one thing I will say is there's one similarity with all those guys you just named, and it's they all have bad quarterbacks. Like Jimmy G, Ryan Tannehill. Like I don't think I don't think we're gonna have that problem with Chase. I mean, I guess you could go the Tyreek Hill route with Mahomes, but also like I think Tyreek just wanted the absolute bag and to live in Miami and do whatever the hell he wants. Like, and I mean, fair, like, go for it. Some players aren't necessarily. I mean, they're definitely guys that are more interested in a payday than winning, and like, that's your prerogative. So
Yeah. And I definitely think it doesn't organizationally. I'm not that worried because the Bengals normally pay quarterbacks and receivers. That's kind of who they pay just
yeah,
in their history. Those are the only guys that have historically gotten paid after like the first contract. Those are the guys that they're normally re-signing. Other guys, that's where you see them let walk, whether good or bad. It is what it is. But I'm not necessarily worried about that, especially because you've heard, I think it was Katie talk about after kind of the Deshaun Watson trade and sign everything. They're talking about already planning for that extension for Joe Burrow. So I'm not really worried about it. I assume he's going to get like this kind of mega deal we're seeing where it's going to be like 6 or 7 years, something like that, probably unprecedented guaranteed money than the Bengals have ever given before. So I definitely think it's interesting. It is always the wide receiver thing just makes me, I'm always intrigued by it because you always hear wide receiver as this very like diva position and always wanting to get paid. And I mean, I think Ja'Marr Chase is better than all three of those guys. I think he's better than Debo. I think he's better than Terry McLaurin. I think he's better than DK. I think he's better than all of them. So I just think it's an interesting kind of, but then also kind of what you said exactly. I do think he's a better quarterback, which I think anyways, Ja'Marr Chase would be incredible no matter what team. But I think Joe Burrow just brings you up to that level, you know?
yeah, and I mean, the wide receiver is just such an interesting position now, based on where we're kind of at. I mean, the last 2 seasons, there's a decent argument that the best receiver in the NFL was a rookie at the time. If you
100%.
want to, if you want to make the Jefferson argument, because I think it's pretty valid. And again, we're talking about another. Those two classes both got everyone was saying these wide receivers are awesome, and this year's the same way. Like, I think that's also just the direction football's going, based on college football is you see so much spread and stuff. Like, that's just the position that they're gonna churn out. So yeah, the receiver's just going to be interesting to follow, because at some point, if they're all getting churned out like crazy, do teams not want to pay him as much and just take a guy in the draft and have 4 or 5 years to control him? Like, because like back in the day, it used to be you pay all these running backs, and now running backs don't really get paid. So,
That's
like,
interesting.
I mean, this would take years to figure out, but like,
Yeah.
it could happen. It'll be interesting to watch.
You would need much more lower drafted guys to outperform higher ones, I think, for that to happen. You've seen for a while these later round running backs pop off. You have undrafted guys like the kid in the Jags I can't think of. James Robinson. You had him pretty much. I think he led the AFC in rushing like what the year before they got Etienne, and then the Jags were just a dumpster fire. But if you start seeing that a little more consistently, where you have these lower drafted receivers come up and outperform these guys, I think you could see it. But it's
Or
just such a talented position.
it might not even need to be lower guys. I mean, like, let's say you're a team like it's hard to think of an example. Like, let's say you took a stud wide receiver and he was good for 4 years. You've kind of priced yourself out on it because like he's going to get paid top dollar. What's to say you don't just use your first again on? Because I mean, it seems to be this was like wide receiver crops just going to keep coming out and being incredible. So I mean, what's to say like a team had a great wide receiver, lets him walk, and like the Packers trade Devontae Adams, and what if they take a guy like whichever wide receiver they want, and he turns into a stud? Like
Yeah.
I'm not saying it's gonna happen, but like it'll be interesting to see because it's a possibility.
Yeah, that'll be definitely interesting. And I think that's going to be in the next years. The very interesting debate is going to be it's obviously very like going to be Tyler Boyd, but it's how is this wide receiver room going to adapt and overcome the next few years? Because you are going to have that where you're going to have to line up an extension for T. Higgins, Jamar Chase. And I think so much of why this three-headed monster of a receiving room is so good is because there is no way you can defend all three of them at the same time. We saw this whole year, you had to pick who you wanted to take away, and one guy was going to eat on you. It happened every game. One receiver popped off every single time, especially when they won. That's just how it happened. You had the Denver game where you had Tyler Boyd go for 96. You had the playoff game against the Chiefs where T. Higgins had the quietest 114 yards I've ever seen in my life. Then you had pretty much every other week with Jamar Chase. So it's going to be interesting. They're going to come to a situation where one of them's going to be gone. It's going to suck. And it's likely going to be Tyler Boyd just because he's older. He's a slot guy, so it's a little bit more replaceable. So it'll be interesting to see.